So I just spent a lot of time talking about construction types and how an instrument is made. Why does that matter? Why do we even care? The reason we care is because if you are buying an instrument for yourself, or you're spending taxpayer dollar to buy instruments for your school program, you want to make sure you're doing that right. If you're spending taxpayer dollar, you have an obligation to do that right. If you're spending your own money, you have a passion to make sure you're spending that well. So we talk about all of this in order for you to be able to ask the right questions. Unfortunately, this industry of violin making is full of thieves. And that sounds really mean and odd, but I've been doing this for a really long time and have worked with every aspect of it. Other music stores. I have worked with dealers who sell instruments to music stores. I have worked with suppliers who take it for, are the middleman between the suppliers to national distributors. I have been a national distributor. I have worked with the manufacturers directly and bought stuff. I have been around to other manufacturing reps, the people who sell stuff from the manufacturers. I have gone directly to the factories and worked with them in the factories. I am a big psycho nerd. And what this all boils down to is this knowledge. Not everybody knows what they're talking about. Sorry, they just don't. They may talk like they do, but they don't. And you'll find this out by just reading this information, the stuff I've just given you. It's going to make you so much more aware of the options of what an instrument can be and how it can be made than almost anybody else in the industry that's out there. This amount of information is tremendously large, and I've trained this to other music store owners and music store staffs for years now because they just don't know it. And it's a really powerful tool. What it allows you to do is ask the right questions and start looking for instruments that are made the way you want them to be made, which is they're going to sound good, they're durable, they're going to last. Unfortunately, in the last 15, 20 years, since about the 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, we've had a tremendous influx of ISOs, instrument-shaped objects, things that look like an instrument, but they are not an instrument at all. And there's all sorts of ways that manufacturers will all sorts of things that they'll do in order to sell you a widget. They don't care what the widget is. They don't care if it's a violin or a ballpoint pen. They just want to sell you a widget. And some of these guys are finding really somewhat seedy ways to get in there in order to hit different price points for them to be able to sell you a widget. And in this case, a violin or a string instrument shaped widget. So let's look at a couple of those things that they do. If it's a good instrument, the instrument has ebony. So ebony pegs, nut, fingerboard, and saddle. All right, all of those pieces are supposed to be made out of ebony, and the end button as well. Why? Because this thing actually has a tremendous amount of tension on it when we are pulling it up into tune. The strings will pull anywhere from 14 to 25 pounds of pressure each. That's 100 pounds of pressure on the instrument that could be trying to rip the neck right off of it. If it's not trying to rip the neck off, it's trying to pull these pegs out, or it's trying to carve down through that nut and trying to rip the end button right out of the instrument. So we've got to have an instrument that's made well. So ebony is been used since the 1300s. It's an African hardwood. It's phenomenally good stuff, but because it's grown in such a specific area, it has a tendency to be a little bit more expensive. And people don't want to source from multiple places because then you're paying shipping from the maple supplier for the neck and back. You're paying shipping for the spruce supplier for the top, and you're going to pay shipping again for the ebony supplier. No, thank you, says a lot of these guys. So instead what they do is they take maple, so they take the chunk of wood that was in here on this neck, and they make it into things like nuts, fingerboards, and pegs. And that causes big problems because maple is still considered a softwood. It's fairly hard, but it's a whole lot softer than ebony is. And the amount of string pressure is going to cut right through that. Now the way you can tell and the way you can check most of the time on fingerboards is you need a peek right in up underneath here. So if you look in underneath the fingerboard and you're looking right underneath here, right up against the neck where it's coming up into the neck, if you look right under there, you kind of have to sneak it up like this to be able to see in there. You're going to see that it's not black, it's actually white. And guess what? Ebony is not white. Ebony is very, very black all the way through. And if you see that white, you know right away that's a maple board, and you don't want to buy that thing because it's going to warp, twist, and bend and cause all sorts of problems for you and your player. Get rid of it. Just say no. If you want to look, if you're worried about pegs, you can see because we've already drilled a hole right straight through the peg. So you just got to turn the peg so you can see the peg hole itself, or take the string off and pull the peg out. So if you pull this one out, you can look inside that peg hole, and if that wood inside that peg hole is white and not black, guess what? It's maple. You don't want to buy that thing. It's a piece of junk. Get rid of it. The other thing you can do, then the other manufacturing processes is it a laminate top or a pressed top or a carved top? So most people don't know that those are different. Most manufacturers, most people selling, at least for the manufacturers, and most music store people who you're buying a violin from have no idea what these differences are. They've never seen this, they've never studied this process, no one's ever told them. So you need to be able to look at the instrument and know what's what. So if you look at the instrument right here on the side, so you look at the F hole itself, some manufacturers, like this particular manufacturer, has actually painted that F hole black. The reason they paint it black is they're trying to hide something. It is an extremely rare high-end violin where we have gone in and chosen just the finest woods that we like. We're really picky about our woods. There's a very rare person that goes in there and colors that black. Normally they're going to leave it, the raw wood, and varnished. And you can actually see the grain starting to go through that. On this one, I can see that it's actually textured and bumpy. Let's see if we can get you that shot. When they're textured and bumpy like that, we know that it's a fairly low quality wood. High quality woods will cut in and end up being nice and smooth inside of there and not textured and bumpy. So we're not overly interested in that kind of instrument. If it's me, I want a solid top instrument because it's so readily available in the industry. Does it mean it's a carved top? No, but I at least want a solid top instrument. How do we tell if it's a carved top or a pressed top? Well, to be honest with you, that one's a lot harder to do. You need to just start asking questions. And those questions are, is this a carved top instrument? Oh, yes, that's absolutely a carved instrument. Tell me about the carving process. Are you guys using machinery to do that, or are you doing it by hand? Oh, no, everything's done by hand. Everything's, of course, by hand. How many craftsmen do you have involved in the making of the instrument? Oh, only one instrument. Only one craftsman's involved in making this instrument? Oh, yes, only one. It's a master luthier. They've been studying their entire lives. And you're going to sell this to me for how much money? If that number is under $3,000, it wasn't one person making that instrument. It just wasn't. There is nobody out there that's going to be spending that much time carving an instrument and be skilled enough to do all of the processes from beginning to end and charge less. They're just not out there. And if they are, they're really stupid. And which means they probably don't know what they're doing, and you don't want to buy it anyway. So those are the types of questions you want to be asking. How many people are involved in the process? If they're honest and say, this is a factory instrument, but it's all hand carved. And that's a very real thing. European shops, Chinese shops, Taiwanese, Korean shops all build this way, and they make some really nice instruments that way. What they do is they bring somebody in and they teach them how to do this one step. And I tell you what, when you get into some of these factories, those people who have been doing that one step are amazing at it. Absolutely amazing. Like the guys who are carving scrolls. There are people who focus on just this scroll part and how do we do it. And they've got jigs or templates that they're using to match and make that a much faster process for them. And I tell you what, they can whip a scroll out in 15 minutes. It's really impressive. Most high-end violin makers will spend 2 to 3 days on a scroll. These guys can do it in 15 minutes and have one that's really close. Why? Because that's all they do. They do it every day. They have the equipment set up just for that. They've got the practice just for that one scroll. And then they send it to the next guy, and the next guy is doing the arc back here and shaping this and making sure that it's perfectly flat on this side. They're not doing the scroll, and the scroll guy's not doing the rest of this. They have their one very specific task that they're trying to do, and they do that really, really well. So your job as a buyer is to suss out all the stuff that is not made of the right materials, maple back and sides, spruce top, ebony fittings all the way around. Get rid of that stuff right away. Solid top versus laminate top. I tell you what, in this day and age, there's almost no reason to buy a laminate top anymore because solid tops are so affordable. If it's a really affordable solid top, I guarantee you it's a pressed top. Guaranteed. And is that a bad thing? No. Is it great? No. but it's a whole lot better than having a laminate top instrument that is absolutely going to sound bad from the day one and it's going to collapse. So this curvature in the top that's shaped like this, we've got that curvature like that. When we put the pressure on the bridge, it's going to flatten that bridge right out. So we want that curve. That curve is what creates this sound. And when that flattens out, all of a sudden the sound goes away and it just doesn't sound very good anymore. So you've got to start finding out that information. So go back through this information that I've just shared with you. I know it's a lot, but if you know that information, if you study it and know that information, you will be the best buyer probably in the state, including all the music stores that don't know this information. So I know it, I'm sorry, I know it's a lot, but I'm a total nerd when it comes to this stuff because I've been doing it for so long and doing it at a really involved level. I've bought for buyers, I've worked for some of the largest music stores in the country, and I want to share that information with you so you are empowered to make really good buying choices. Study that information and be awesome.